Hello everybody. I'm here to work with you today on the next step of your research paper, which is to start assembling your outline. Think of your outline as the skeleton of your final paper. It will be the bones of your work. You'll flesh it out with paragraphs and sentences and fluidity when it comes time to actually typing the paper. So right now, if you just take a quick look, you'll notice we have Roman numerals and letters, and we're not necessarily going to be writing in full sentences. Instead, it's only the skeleton. Now the format, as far as the heading is concerned, will always be the same. So it'll be your name at the top. It just got cut off, I'm sorry to say. But this would be your name, then the teacher's name, English 10 honors, and the due date, which would be next week sometime. Under Roman numeral 1, actually you'll center your title. So at this point we would like to have a title. Do not have as your title the name of your writer, Wallace Stevens, okay? We're not looking for someone to just use the author's name as the title of their work, nor are we looking for you to have a one-word title that represents your theme. For example, guilt. We don't want that as a title either. We want something catchy. We want something creative. We want something that's going to reflect the theme that you will be exploring later on. Roman numeral 1 would be typed. You still put Roman numeral 1 right here, but you're basically just copying and pasting your thesis paragraph, the one that you submitted a few weeks ago and the one for which you received a number of corrections. You would edit everything that needed to be edited, and you will place your introductory paragraph right there. So there's really not much to worry about under Roman numeral 1. Since I'm talking about Roman numerals, I don't want it to mislead you that each Roman numeral represents one paragraph. We don't want that, because this paper overall is going to be 4 to 6 pages, and if we make every Roman numeral a singular paragraph or a single paragraph, that means you'd only have 5 paragraphs for 5 to 6 pages. That's crazy. So within each section, aside from section 1, so we're not paying attention to that anymore, but within each section, you probably will have maybe 2 to 3 paragraphs per poem. So all of this stuff doesn't have to get jammed into one paragraph. I can't stress that enough. It should be at least 2 paragraphs, probably 3 paragraphs per work of literature. Okay? Essentially, what are you going to be doing? Well, let's start with poem number 1. Over here, you'll notice that we have Roman numeral 2 and the title of the first poem. Now, you can decide which poem you want to put first. That's up to you. A lot of times people like to begin with the poem that's the most powerful so they can really capture their reader's attention. That's fine. You can build toward a crescendo, whichever you prefer. But your title of your first poem will be right there. We need to give a little background on the piece. Okay, so if we're dealing with something like I Hear America Singing, we want to give the setting. This is a poem that deals with blue-collar workers in 19th century America. Whitman was no stranger to New York City, and he was a great observer of people. This poem is a celebration of the common man. So we have a little introduction to the poem, a little bit about the circumstances or the people that are involved, and then we're building our argument around the 3 quotes that we've taken from the primary source. So 3 quotes that you've taken from, let's say, I Hear America Singing. Every time you're doing a quote, you want to think about the sandwich principle. Okay, what do I mean by the sandwich principle? Well, think about a sandwich. You have 1 slice of bread, and then you have whatever you're putting inside. Maybe it's the tuna, and then another slice of bread. This tuna fish, ham and cheese, portobello mushroom if you're vegan, I don't know. that is going to be the quote itself. But you can't just dump it there. The slices of bread are used to intro it and then afterwards analyze it. So every time you're doing a reference, you want to give the circumstances, what's going on, deliver it, and then react to it. Why have you chosen it? What particular words in that quote that you've selected ties into your theme? At that point, you might have enough material based on one solid quote to end your paragraph and begin a new paragraph. That's up to you. Depends on how much meat your quotes have. So essentially you're doing this 3 times because you have 3 quotes. So you'll intro it, deliver it, and analyze it, intro it, deliver it, and analyze it each time. Always keeping in mind the power of your thesis. What is it exactly that you're trying to prove? You want to bring everything back to that. You don't want to be too repetitive at the same time, but you want to make sure that you're pulling everything in. Not only do we have to deal with the 3 primary source quotes, but at some point you have to include 1 secondary source quote. What do I mean by secondary source? That's 1 critic. 1 critic who says something about either the poem, if you're lucky enough to find a critic who comments on the poem, or a critic who's commenting on the author and his writing in such a way that you could tie it into this poem. So remember, you've researched about 5 or 6 critics. By this point, you want to narrow it down to 3 really good ones and figure out how you can place a critic with each of the poems. A little bit of critical support. Where do you place the critical support? That's up to you. Sometimes it fits in nicely after a particular reference that you have. You might want to introduce the critic quote right there. You might want to start with a critic's quote for your poem. You might want to finish with a critic's quote after you've done all the primary source quotes. It doesn't matter where you put it, as long as it is fluid and as long as it's in there somewhere. So let's take a look at a sample, because some of this might sound a little bit vague. What I have placed here on the table is a series of quotes that come from a primary source and 1 quote that comes from a secondary source, a critical source. And because it would be unfair to work on Whitman or to work on Bradstreet, because not everybody's going to have that particular poet, it gives an unfair advantage to some people, we're just going to deal with a work of literature that we've all covered, and that is Ralph Waldo Emerson's Nature. So my bibliographic card for Nature is given number 3, Emerson, Ralph Waldo. The title of the essay was Nature. It was in the American Literature iBook from Kellenberg Memorial, and it was the date on the publication is 2015 to 16, and it was the pages. These are the pages that comprise the work. Now, I unfortunately took references somewhere else, so I'll have to change those page numbers for you just to pretend. But take a look here. I've got primary source quotes. We've only required 3. I actually have 6 of them here because they're kind of short. They all come from Nature, and they're all going to be proving my theme. Now, just for argument's sake, I'm pretending that my essay is going to be on the power of nature, and my theme is going to be that nature is seen as a healer. Okay? My critical source quote, my bibliographic card is over here. It's with number 1. The fellow's name was Michael Jones. He was in Essays for Students. I have all my bibliographic information here, and this was the quote that I took from Jones. So now I lay out all of my cards here, and I have to determine how am I going to build my argument around these quotes. Notice every time I took a quote, I put the page number where I found it from. So again, my pages don't match, only because I took these from a different source, but I'll just make this page 125, 125, 126, 127. I'm just making this up. 127, 127. I don't have a page number for Jones because this was an online source, and online sources don't have page numbers, so I don't have to worry about that. But when it comes time to putting my skeleton together, my outline, I want to figure out where would my first quote come from? How can I build to the next one? What are the circumstances? How can I get it to be fluid? And remember, I'm not really writing a whole lot. I'm not writing a full paragraph here. That's not the assignment. The assignment is an outline. So I'm just going to give you the bare bones of what an outline would look like if I were dealing with nature as a healer from Emerson's essay. Okay, so take a look. This is a sample essay. I have the student's name is up top here, which again, unfortunately, is cut off. The teacher's name, the course, the due date. My title is centered, and my title is The Power of Nature. I have pasted, or I will paste, my introductory paragraph here. And I'm just telling you, my thesis statement is the idea that nature is seen as a healer. I actually took that from a critical source. The critic's name was Smith. It was in a book, so it's page 45. I'm giving attribution. I'm giving credit to this critic because it wasn't my idea. I got this idea for nature as a healer from a fellow named Michael Smith. Okay, so my first work of literature is Emerson's essay Nature. My second work of literature will be Walden, and then I would need a third work of literature if I were to continue. But let's just stick with this one. Remember what we said on the original outline? Give a little background. Emerson's Nature delivers an uplifting message. Nature speaks to all mankind, both adults and children. I'm building to my first quote. Adults can see nature, but approach it on a superficial or functional level. Children embrace it in a spiritual way. Now I'm ready to give one of my quotes because I've introed it, I've led up to it. I have a few words here. Nature becomes, quote, part of his daily food, part of man's daily food. I follow it up with the author and the page number from whence it came. I'm getting that from the card. So again, if I adjust the page numbers and make that page 125, I want to react to this now. I don't want to just dump it there. I want to react to it. In other words, spending time in natural surroundings is like being nourished by something greater than oneself. Does this have anything to do with nature as a healer? Yes. You're being nourished by something greater than you. When a child is outdoors, a wild delight runs through him. That's another quote. Again, we'll pretend that's from page 125. I have to react to this. There's no greater joy for a child or a youth to be immersed than to be immersed in nature. Nature is making you feel better. Nature is healer, right? Nature can be for humanity a very spiritual experience. It is equated with, quote, the plantations of God, where sanctity reigns, and there is no calamity which nature cannot rejoin. There is no calamity which nature cannot improve, make better, overcome. Let me react and build this up. Nature, therefore, helps man behold something as beautiful as his own nature, as beautiful as himself, and divine spirit runs throughout everything, the outside world and the human being. This connection to the divine aspect of nature creates a feeling of well-being. Now notice, this is a secondary source quote. It's a paraphrase. That's why you don't see any quotation marks around it. It's a paraphrase from Jones, the fellow whom we took from essays by students, essays for students, right? So what did I do here? I actually have lots of little quotes, many more than 3. I have a bunch of little ones, probably about 6 in here, but in between I'm weaving together some thoughts, I'm introing it, the quote, I'm delivering it, I'm analyzing it, and all the while I'm keeping in mind the idea of my theme, which is that nature is proved to be a healer. I've included a critical source as well. It just so happens that I put it at the very end to wrap things up because Jones's words serve as a perfect summary to tie it back to the theme. When I get to Roman numeral 3, then I'm ready to do my second poem, or in this case I move on to Thoreau's Walden. and we continue with that kind of thing. So therefore, what would I be looking for in your outline? The proper heading, a title, full thesis paragraph, 3 primary source quotes, 1 secondary source quote for each poem. However you want to organize that critical source is up to you. Same here, same for poem number 3. I do need to add a skeleton of my conclusion. This returns to our theme. It signals the end of the paper. I'll reword my thesis statement. I'll probably come back to the author's name and the 3 poem titles. And most importantly, I want to have a good clincher. What's a clincher? It's the last sentence of the essay. It should be powerful, creative, incisive, something that finishes up with some pizzazz. You know, you don't want to introduce a totally new idea, but you want to finish up with something very powerful. Just a quick reminder, for every primary source quote, you should include in parentheses, either the page number or the lines. LL is, plural for lines 4 to 6, line 1. If you don't have lines, then you would just do page number. If you're an online source, you got this poem from an online source, and they don't give lines, and there is no pagination, then the only thing you will put in the parentheses is the word online. That'll hold the spot. Okay? So I should see parentheses for every quote with some kind of documentation. Same thing for the secondary source quote. In the secondary source quote parentheses, I should see the name of the critic. Maybe it's the fellow named Jones. And I won't have page numbers or line numbers if it's an online source. If I'm taking Jones, though, from a book, and I do have a page number for Jones in a book, then by all means, I'm going to include that in the parentheses. So I hope this makes sense. You won't be submitting a works cited page with the outline. And remember, the Roman numerals do not represent paragraphs when it comes time to go from your skeleton to fleshing it out with skin and bone and a body, when you're actually ready to type the paper. This is just an outline. That's all it is. But in it, I should be able to find everything coming back to your theme, a brief introduction of a quote, the delivery of the quote, a brief analysis, 3 times for each of the poems. Okay, good luck.